Hello, today we're here together with a wonderful regenerative leader, Anuradha Chugh, with experience as Chief Executive of Pukka Herbs, where she was responsible for governance and strategy, not to mention being a marketing professional with more than 25 years experience in the consumer packaged goods industry. Anu has also served in marketing roles for several other large global organizations. One of the many ways that Anu is now making positive impacts in the world is through her work to mentor women leaders like herself. She's also a new board member of B Lab UK, a non-executive director of F&C Investment Trust, and Roots, which is an organization based in London focused on training and growing compassionate and inclusive leaders. We're so excited that you've joined us, Anu, for another Unhurried Conversation with EarthWork Collective.
Thank you.
We were talking about your introduction and how to introduce you, and then regenerative leader seems to fit you very well. When did you start calling yourself a regenerative leader? How do you define that?
Yeah, no, I've thought a lot about the definition of regenerative. Also because we had a big debate within our company at Pukka, because those who work in the sustainability team and deeply with purpose and sustainability really didn't like the word regenerative or regeneration, because they thought it's like a buzzword. It's another greenwashing word that is becoming trendy and faddy. And they were like, we really don't like it. And I kept challenging them because, one, I'm a marketer, so it is trendy and fatty, and it's a nice term. but secondly, I genuinely think that the work that we were doing at Pukka was very regenerative, in the sense that we were genuinely, because it's organic plants, we were genuinely sequestering carbon into the soil. So at one level, we were working physically at the planet level to regenerate. But secondly, the work that we were doing in terms of living wages to our supply chain, really linked prosperity across the supply chain, meant that we were, through our work, regenerating their economies and regenerating the livelihood of our supply chain as well. On top of that, Pukka tea regenerates you. It regenerates, it puts back positivity into what we do. So right through supply chain, right through consumers, but very importantly, even at the employee level, a lot of the work that we were doing at Pukka was about regenerating the person, the whole person. So really enabling the whole person to come to work. A lot of our programs were very intentional in enabling the whole person to be thriving, not just 9 to 5 in the office, but what they take back. It's horrible if you can thrive and grow 9 to 5 and then you go and kick the cat from on the weekend, right? So that just doesn't work. So you have to be a happy whole person. So I really think and believe that the work that I have been doing as a leader, where I have the ability to influence the work culture as well as the linked supply chain, is regenerative. So I challenged my team a lot. and I was like, we're not extractive. And I think to their credit, they're right, because we're not carbon neutral, we're not carbon positive, right? So any business that is especially growing is taking out and not giving back to the same degree. So in a very, very technical sense, they're right. Till you're actually really carbon sequestering, net carbon sequestering, you're not really regenerative.
Yes. Scott has a favorite sentence that he keeps reminding of us very often. Scott, would you like to talk to us about the how do you put it? There's perfect involved, and there's
perfect being the enemy of the good.
Yes.
And I just love that, because as we've developed our offerings and first of all, our mission, and then our ideas, and then our offerings from EarthWork, one of the biggest challenges I had as somebody from business, from working in business for many years, when I joined the Carbon Almanac, for example, they ask you to give a little commercial for yourself and write it up and then put it on the website. And I spent a lot of time thinking about it. And I just said, I just want to take my knowledge, experience, and contacts in the business world and use that information to help them make sensible transitions to more sensible working, to more regenerative practices, to just frankly working better in the world. And if you say it absolutely has to be this way, and that's the only way, you're going to knock out virtually everyone from even trying. And then you'll get into arguments about how good they're doing the job. I'd much rather have people, in fact, I think Seth Godin has even said it, if we got 20% of the people to change their habits, we'd solve most of our problems. And so that is really, I think, what Etrit's referring to. And we try to take that approach when we talk to people, when we share our educational services with people, when we consult with people. It's like, you know what? Just get started and get on the right path. So I'll leave it at that. That's what I think.
Yeah, completely agree. Completely agree.
So one thing that I'm wondering about right now is also, with all these years of experience and everything that you have done in between, what does success mean to you? And how has the meaning of success changed through time for you? Yeah. So I realize it's a big question.
Yeah. No, I do think a lot about things like that. So I was just cleaning up my papers and old things, and I came across my diary that I must have written when I was 16, I think. So I had just given some important exams and I was still waiting for the results. And, that diary was full of anxiety. It was writing about, will I do well? How will I do? What will the future be? How will it all be? So, so we deal with that all the time. And fast forward many years, I just turned 50 last year. And even right now, I'm kind of reassessing my life, and I'm saying, what do I want to do next? And will I, you're constantly reassessing and resetting the definition of what success is. So it's an impossible question to answer in that complete one-line sense. And I think it's also an important, difficult question to teach someone else. So again, my kids are a good example. So my son was, when I heard him going through the same angst that I was going through at his age, I wanted to give advice and I wanted to give wisdom, and I said, there's no point.
But there must be some guidelines, right? Like, what do you use as points of orientation for yourself?
I think a good night's sleep.
Mm.
So a good night's sleep and really not taking worry into, your body and your mind are quite linked as well. So, if you are at peace with where you are, then that I think is a good measure. I think what I have struggled with, again, in context of children, and, is that, how children are when they're young, they want to be the next Roger, the tennis player, Roger Federer. Yeah. So my son wanted to be the next Federer. And I didn't say, no, you're not going to be the next Federer. But then around 13, his goal of success changed, and he realized maybe he's not going to be the next Federer. So it's success that that line changed. So I think it is healthy for that line to change. I think it's healthy for us to keep reassessing what it means for us. I don't think it means it's lowering the bar or making it different. I'm sorry, I'm not giving you one definition, but
no,
I think for me,
I'm
success...
exactly looking for this, the different ways in which we can think about success, because how we are used to think that success means having a good job, success means having a career, success means having a family by a certain, and then who said that? Whose standards are those? Do I really believe all of that? So I was wondering what that path looked like for you, and
it's
now.
Also, I feel a little bit false because, if on paper someone was to look at my life, they'll say you've had a successful life. So then it is a bit of a fraud to say, oh, success means I'm balanced, success, because you you have actually led a successful life. So great on you to say success is body and mind and a good sleep, because you're a CEO of a business, so you can say that. So I think you've also got to, but I'm not the CEO of Amazon or Google or whatever else, so that line can keep shifting if that's going to be your external measure. So I think it has to be an internal measure.
I think what you just said is really interesting, because we all know that when we read leading business authors, watch TED Talks, whatever, even read contemporary, online literature and commentary, there's always that tension between being successful means financial, being successful means taking care of people, being successful means having a work-life balance, which the latest thing, we talk about things that have been taken out of their vernacular. Now they're saying there's no such thing as work-life balance. You need to think of your work and life together, and your people in both of those lives, and they're really one life, and all of these things. And sometimes it makes people think, well, what should I hang my hat on? What should I aim for? And so I hear you loud and clear, and we've struggled with many of the same things. In fact, I'm sure most of our viewers struggle with those same questions. So I was wondering, with the work you're doing with women and refugees now, as one of the several things you're working on right now, how can you impart to them to sort of get that baseline, to start thinking what you said about getting the sleep, having that balance between your mind and your body, but also how you can carry that into employment and leadership, as you spoke of?
In this program, this mentorship program, the mentors pay money, right? And I think that's right, because the value equation is very the other way around. As in, I learned from the asylum seeker, from the women who are in the situation of asylum seeking. I learned massively from them. So all of us who are the so-called mentors to these women are the ones who are doing the learning. So it's right that we do the paying as well, because they're absolutely amazing women who have uprooted everything that is their identity, and they're coming and starting afresh. It's a horrible situation, because what they're needing right now is very basic, but they're really amazing. Very basic in the sense of, when I had my one-to-one relationship with my mentee, she was just so grateful that there was someone who was a successful business person talking to her as a business person, and not as a woman who is in the asylum seeking refugee context. Right now she could not work. You can't work when you're in the asylum system. But before that, in Sri Lanka, she was the head of a radio station, right? So, and when I had that relationship with her for that period that I was coaching her, I was talking to her as the head of a radio station, and that was the conversation we were having. And for her, she just almost had tears in her eyes, because people had just been treating her as the person who has to survive on £5 a day. That's what a refugee asylum seeker gets while they're in that process, rather than someone who is capable and a capable businesswoman. So from different people in different walks of life, I think you can learn a lot. You can really learn humility, and you can learn, that your perspective is only one perspective. And I think that insight was very useful in my last role at Pukka, when I essentially did a large-scale organizational restructuring, which involved redundancy for a large number of the people within the organization. And of course, you go in with the view that redundancy is bad, it's painful, etc., right? Or it has to be done. So there are many preconceived notions. But when you're doing it for 124 people, I learned that I have to keep my subjective views away, and I have to really go in with a very open mind, because everyone's perspective, life situation is very different. And in a consultation process, you're doing what is best for their perspective and not your own. And I think that I learned from my mentoring in the Roots program. And then many years later, I was able to use that in the context of really leading the consultation process that I was doing afterwards.
Thank you for that. I mean, one of the things I heard you say loud and clear is that we spend so much time on labels of people and what they do in life versus what they really are. They're human beings, and they are going to have different situations. Thank you very much for that. Etrit?
Yeah, I really love that of reversing the process, reversing the relationship when it comes to mentor-mentee. I find something similar happens with with children and parents also. Like the moment you realize that you can learn from your child, that's amazing. Like the sense of empowerment that comes from the ownership of the whole process becomes very, very different. And and I also recognize the struggle of unlearning that goes to all this. Like realizing that we are set to think in certain ways where we all come in with assumptions, right, of how things are going to be. So
no, I think the learning from children is amazing, massive. For me, it was really a defining moment in my life when I think my son was easy. My elder one was, put him in nursery at 8 o'clock, picked him up at 6 o'clock. He never complained. My daughter wasn't, and she was like, "You're the only mom who works. Everyone else comes for sports day. And why are you not there for my winter play? And why are you not there?" So she was like constant. And and I was like, "What is going on here?" I think yes, it upset me, but I was also more upset that where is she getting these views from that the mom has to be at home and go for sports day? So I was like really not happy. But then I took her to my work because this was troubling me, and I took her to work. And one day, not planned, I just took her to work one day, and then I said, and then she said, "Oh, so these people all report to you? They all listen?" I said, "They all listen to you," in her language. She was still 4 or 5, and I said, "Yeah, they all listen to me, Aditi." and then it was that, and that was the shift. Yeah. And that was the shift. And she is an extremely strong woman and a strong feminist, and she's taught me so much about being a independent personality. But it was important for me to really set her on that path. But after that, I have really gained back more.
And I love this idea of gaining because you give. Oh, and this brings me back to the idea of because we're talking regeneration, and one of the conversations that we have been having lately at EarthWork is, so we want to keep doing this kind of work, but what does financial success mean to us? What does that look like? And so this past week there was something called the Transformational Learning Summit, and I listened to Nipun Mehta. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He has started something called the service space, and it has been for 20 years almost. And it's basically the idea that people get together and they do things together, but it's completely on a voluntary basis. And they're giving, everybody is giving. And you're receiving because you're giving. You're not giving to receive. You notice that you are receiving because you're giving. And I really loved this idea because it feels so much nature inspired at the core. And we're still wondering, how do you make something like that work financially?
Financially, yeah. It's not a new thought, right? Because every religion, every culture has service as part of a practice. And I think that's the way they've kind of dealt with the financial part of it, because it's almost like what you have to do, right? So I think even in many religions, 10% is what you have to give, or service is what you have to do. So a way of non-monetizing it has been the answer, if I kind of look back into history, I think. So I don't know if there is a need to monetize it or a need to financially make it correct.
Yes, this was exactly Nipur's point also. Like you don't think about it and it will happen.
Yeah.
And we live in a world where we have to pay bills, right? And I wonder whether we're asking the wrong questions.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether it's possible to approach it differently, to think differently about it.
Yeah.
And still trying to figure that out. So.
No, I think that is a valid. It's a valid challenge. I'm thinking about Roots, right? It's a very small organization, really tiny, a founder and 5 employees. And then we're more trustees who work for it pro bono than there are actually employees, and we don't work. So, but they're not asking for much in return. And maybe that's the answer. So in their giving, of course, they're getting grants and, they're taking back a salary, but it's not a lot in terms of, I need to grow 10%, 20%. It's not KPI'd in that way. I'm going to be starting something called Bio Leadership next month, where I haven't defined my project yet. I haven't defined exactly what I will work on, but it's something in this area of good finance for good business. So your question's not wrong. I just don't have the answer yet. I don't know what the answer will be. But
we don't expect you to have it. It's a little early, right? I mean, you're just getting into it. So,
but if you have more thoughts for my project, then I'm more than happy to have it, because the whole idea of this bio leadership course is that you work with people who are also on their own quest to find their own answers on various things. But just by being together in a cohort, you might just share and cross exchange and feed each other.
Precisely. We're very much on the same page with you. We've actually gone through some of these very similar issues and exercises. And one of the things I'd like to ask is, why is it so hard for the corporate world, even the middle market world? Maybe it's a lot easier for the small business world, and yet they'll talk about the challenges they've got. So the question is, from the business world to what we know is right in our hearts. And when we ask that question of someone, when you're out in nature, how do you feel? I mean, how many people are going to say, I hate it? No one, almost no one. How can we make that bridge so people really start thinking of the world as something that is paramount in importance, and human relations being really important? How can the corporate world change? And what are some ways that our audience could hear from you on how you've accomplished those things?
Yeah, and that's my day job, right? So I think very much since I joined Ben & Jerry's, I understood what linked prosperity really means. I kind of defined it in the beginning when I talked it through Pukka, in terms of, all the stakeholders really benefiting from the produce of the work that we do, right? And I think I work very closely with B Corps, so other B Corps, and I'm on the board of the B Lab UK as well. But that is the core tenet, which is all stakeholders benefit. And when you do that, there is no going away from the fact that you can't have a toxic environment in the office. You just can't, because then you're not living it in your office. You can't be not paying living wages to your suppliers, because then you're not, again, living it. So just that one tenet, which is all stakeholders benefit from the activity, is what really unlocks different parts. Many B Corps are doing lots of innovative things, like putting nature on the board. So in the board, in governance itself, you really take the perspective of all stakeholders, and you have decision-making power to nature as well. So there is a lot of pioneering work, thought, and actual success that is being put in practice through organizations like B Corp. My job is that's not enough, right? These are islands of coherence. Yeah, like Otto Sharma used in that that sentence. These are islands of coherence. It's great to have islands of coherence because then we know the model works, because these are highly successful businesses, but we need continents to shift. Yeah.
Where's the resistance, do you think? Why is the resistance to have more of this model? Why would you say is the biggest barrier?
It's very disappointing when you look at the US right now. So, anything in this area is not allowed to go mainstream. It's labeled woke, it's labeled, you've got legislations that are going against this sort of stuff in many of the states in the US. So there's a lot of existing lobbyists that I think are, at the same time, there is a very, very strong philosophy of shareholder premise, right? That everything is baked into the shareholder price. So a company that is going to do good is going to increase its shareholder prices. So that's fine. So, as long as I keep my attention. So I think that basic tenet of the way capitalism is today is still holding very strong.
I got to ask this question. I know you've changed some minds. And I would just ask you, what are a couple ways, and I'm not expecting you to have all the answers, but what are a couple ways you've gotten people to get beyond their fear?
Yeah.
Because I see it as a fear of change, a fear of losing something. We talk all about how the whole climate change argument gets framed in terms of you're going to lose something, you're going to have to give this up, and you may have to, but no one's really talking about what you're going to gain. And I just wonder, how have you've had to deal with those questions in the corporate boardroom?
Yes.
How have you addressed those concerns?
So when you're actually faced with the constraint, right? So when you want to do the net zero pathway and you can't because it's going to cost more to be able to do that. So those points when there is a cross, that's the point of innovation. So that's the point when real innovation happens. And my argument to board people, to leaders, is that jump on those points, because those are the points where you'll really get more profit, more employee engagement. You'll actually give better shareholder return if you really jump on those points. So to give you an example, which I was just starting to give you, which is when everyone wants to do the net zero transition, but minor innovations aren't going to solve it. Now you want an innovation that's going to get you more gross profit as well as lower carbon intensity. This is a great point to really say, I don't want to hear any constraints. I want to know what's going to enable this. And I'll put the capital and money to enable that. Because in something like tea, you've got a tea bag, and inside the tea bag, you've got another bag. And inside that, you've got another, then you've got the product, right? Now, any finance guy will tell you that if I take this off, I'll save money, right? And your sustainability person will tell you that, if you take this off, I'll reduce my carbon footprint as well. But then the herbal department will say, but then this tea product is not going to able to retain its great quality because it's gone in the air, it'll diffuse, etc. Valid. But now let's find me a technology in which the tea capsules, the tea flavor will actually get encapsulated and stay longer. And let's work towards doing that. Because if we can find that, then we can put more loose tea in this bag, which will be better for the environment and better for the consumer and better for the CFO. So, and I think this takes a little bravery, because if you're not going to get the answer, it takes courage from the leadership to say, this is what we'll do, because it's easier for me to get next year's growth by selling more of this, rather than trying to refocus my team on trying to do a system innovation change. So I think the way I put it back is we need more courage from leaders to really jump on those points of conflict because at that point of conflict is when there is real innovation.
Yes. Creativity loves constraints, right?
Yes, absolutely. You summarized it. Thank you.
Okay. I possibly may have another difficult question because I'm thinking about something called the trap of conformity. And that's a phrase that Jacqueline Novogratz uses in her book, A Manifesto to Moral Leadership. I think
Okay.
you enjoy that a lot because
Let's write it down. Yeah.
okay, I will.
Yeah.
But it is a book where she talks about her journey of going from the world of finance to the world of philanthropy, but making philanthropy not simply like she's the woman who revolutionized philanthropy, because it's about, ties very well to what you're saying, seeing the person for a person rather than a label, seeing like this person has desires and wishes and needs and is trying to work towards them. So how can we empower each other by seeing each other? And it all begins with seeing each other, right?
Yeah.
And she also talks about the trap of conformity, because the world is set in a certain way, right? There are people who are benefiting because things are this way, and also it's easy to do things the way they are. Just go with the flow, right? Go with what everybody does. Don't overthink it. Just and yet we know in our hearts that what we're doing is not like we cannot keep doing it. We're doing harm to everything, ourselves included. So in those moments when you feel the tension between, oh, I have to conform, and no, in my heart I know this is wrong, how do you navigate that? Or like, can you think of examples that, because human beings, we best learn through examples of usually other people's mistakes.
Yeah. No, there are definitely examples. I think a large part of what we teach when you're talking about a regenerative work environment is to bring your authentic self in, right? And at Pukka, one of the values, the way that's enshrined and made into a day-to-day living thing, is the wisdom seeds. And the wisdom seeds are simple. So these are basically truth, clarity, respect, and courage, right? And in the day-to-day practice, it's how do we bring these 4 wisdom seeds to life in every meeting, in every situation, in every place. Now, of course, not everything goes smoothly. So when you take this entire point about the whole redundancy and organizational change that we have to do, you're confronted, right? You're confronted with, how do I now do this with respect? How do I be truthful? And as a leader, you can't disclose everything. You can't be truthful all the time. You've got to find the right way right time in which you say things. Otherwise, you can just cause panic. So, how do you hold true to the values of to your own values, but also the values of your company? So when I was facing the whole redundancy thing and I was telling the people that, look, this is what we're going to do, they were like, tell us the truth. And I'm like, I am telling you that on this day, I will tell you more, and they were like, but then what happens to our wisdom seed values? You're not telling me the truth. And I'm like, yes, I will give you clarity when I have clarity. That's also another wisdom seed. Before I have clarity, I'll not give you the clarity. Otherwise, it's just going to be panic. So these are, tough times when you have to really make choices, and you have to almost go in and say, how do you live at this point of conflict? And how do you also not just be very short-termist, but also take a longer view? So I think I do like these wisdom seeds, because you have to balance truth, respect, courage, clarity multiple times. You can't be naive and just say everything plays up in 100% all the time. So, I played on the clarity and courage card very, very hard when I was not able to really in the service of really the more longer term. So that's one example. I like your point about, conformity, because when you know that something is tough or something is difficult, I think the only way is to dig deep and to, everyone has a North Star. So it is, I think, advantageous to have thought about the North Star before the storm really hits.
I'm struck by something you just said that really resonates with me right now. I work a lot in the field of financial journalism, and there's a huge demand for transparency, just like there is in many other things, politics and others. And the thing about transparency is just being transparent about something doesn't mean you're going to get to the why it's there. And I think when you mentioned the company making a decision, we're going to, in the US, we call it layoffs. We're going to lay people off.
Yeah.
And the argument becomes, I can't believe they're laying people off.
Yeah.
Don't we know? And then the company is saying, we have to lay off or else.
Yeah.
And we're faced with difficult decisions. And the humanity gets lost in all of
Yes.
it. And if people just started putting themselves in the other person's position and being empathetic, as long as you had that North Star and you had those principles you describe, I do believe we'd be much better off. And again, it's back to the why. And if companies could form real clear ideas of why they're doing these things, and are we really just thinking short term, or are we thinking longer term? And here's why we're doing this. It won't just become an argument between their investors and all going online arguing about things, and all it is numbers. Because we just had a big controversy in the press about people being called heads. I have to cut X number of heads.
Okay.
And this was a large company. It just happened a couple of days ago. And I thought it was really interesting. Do we really care what we call them? And then I thought maybe we should just say human beings or people. There was a whole argument about what you called them. The reality is, why don't we talk about why we're having to do this?
Yeah.
And maybe that is that discussion. We talk in EarthWork of the edge effect abundance. The fact that when you peer over the edge, say even in a company silo, you see that other silo, you start getting really interesting ideas. You never talked before, but once you're encouraged to get together and talk, you mentioned something just like it earlier. When people actually were talking about solutions, they're like, wait, why don't we just go all the way? Why don't we do this? Why don't we get it done? You never thought that was a possibility until you started talking to people who maybe didn't agree with you, maybe had different points of view. And I don't know how much of that happens in corporate boardrooms, or if it's all money, money, money all the way and short term. But if we can move to a more holistic view, and if our people understand it, it just seems like what you're saying is, you talked about bringing your humanity back. Well, I can't answer that and that, but I can talk to you these angles.
I think a lot of the changes that we're facing, a lot of the crises that's facing even the most money-minded boards, right? Whether it is nature disclosures, whether it is, old-fashioned ESG, is forcing them to take a less siloed approach. It can, don't get me wrong, still become very tick-boxed and can become quite horrible as well. But I think this is more an opportunity for those silos to be broken, for things to be seen in the more holistic perspective. A lot of the more concepts like the donut economics, etc., which look at things in a more holistic way, are helping us do that.
I love the conversation that we're having about short term and long term also, because usually when I hear it out in the public conversation, it is used as a beating stick rather than a helping stick to help us measure our quality of the thinking, as both Scott and you were mentioning. And it's such a pity that we are so much intent on pulling each other's eyes out rather than help each other to see differently.
Yeah, I look, if you have a wand, you would want everyone to learn from nature, which is where you started, right? Because then when you learn from nature, you see that long-term and short-term live together, so a tree lasts for many years, many, many, many years, but it also goes through short cycles. So I think all over nature, you can really see how all these conflicts can be resolved. Satish Kumar famously says that we are part of nature. We are nature. We're not separate. We're not part of nature. We are nature. So I think the more we can get corporate leaders to not separate nature and make that the walk that they take in the weekend, but make that part of their life. I think that would be my one easy advice to everyone. Take your teams out for afternoon nature walks. Have, ways in which you really force them if they need forcing. I think most people don't need to be forced to go and walk out for a walk, but I think nature can be our best teacher.
And
That's an awesome way to end it. And I could give you maybe an even better word. You used it earlier, and I'm just going to add 2 letters to the top of it. It's encourage them.
Yeah.
Give them the courage. You give them the courage to go out, create the world they want.
Yeah.
And I think people don't realize how much power they have to create the world they want. I mean, we've messed this world up for about 150, 170 years, more than any time in its history. We have a chance to say, what do we really want it to look like?
Yeah. I like that a lot.
So the last thing, Anu, where can people find you? Where can they read more about your work and stay in touch with what you do?
LinkedIn's normally the best. I've also started to write a little bit more blogs. I'm not publishing them that much because something very new. I've not yet got the courage to put my blogs out there, but I'll do it with this community. That it might be a good way to do that. So I can send you the link to my blog posts. But yeah, LinkedIn and this newbie bloggy thing that I'm doing are the 2 best places.
Thank you.
Well, you've done great work, and you're doing even better work right now. And it's also important we recognize that without leaders like you, we wouldn't have inspiration to reach out even further to people we know in our communities and our localities, and try to spread regenerative principles while saying we know it's not an overnight success, but it's got to get started now. It's got to get started now. We want to help you. We want to encourage you. And you encourage people just by what you're doing on it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Take care.